I think everybody here thinks it's been an absolutely amazing success because the whole Olympics was in doubt until a few weeks before it actually started. So to put on the show they have in such fantastic venues and put on such a great display of sport has been absolutely amazing.
What's been said about the impact of the Games on the COVID situation in Tokyo?
Well, obviously, as you've just mentioned, the cases are rising all the time. They recorded 4,500 cases today, and Japan nationally passed 1 million cases since the pandemic started. There's been 382 cases linked to the Olympics, but the International Olympic Committee and Tokyo 2020 are both adamant that there's been no crossover between the Olympics and the local upsurge. Prime Minister Suga said today at an event in Hiroshima that he believes that the rise in cases is linked more to the Delta variant than the Olympics.
Well, prior to the Games, there was a lot of opposition from Japanese people to the Games. Has that changed throughout the event?
Certainly the fact that Japan is doing so well in the sport, they've won 22 gold medals and they're heading for their best Olympics ever, has certainly made a big difference to the attitude of the people here. But there's still a lack of atmosphere that you would normally associate with the Olympics. Just being around the city, there's no city dressing, there's no feeling of you're at a major event because, of course, foreign spectators are banned along with all spectators. So, there's no foreign presence here apart from the athletes and the journalists.
We can imagine the atmosphere would be lacking somewhat. But of course, around the world, many of us in lockdown have been able to benefit from Japan hosting the Games. What will Japan gain from it all?
Well, I think it's a lot of goodwill internationally. It will still have these fantastic venues that they built for the Games that hopefully they'll be able to, stage major events again in the future. And of course, the same way as countries like Australia and Britain have revelled in the medal success of their teams, it's been a real boost to the Japanese public here that they've done so well in the medals table. They're currently third behind China and the US.
It has been an amazing Games for us. What have been some of the more memorable moments for you in covering these Games?
Well, I think one of the overwhelming feelings I'll take away from these Games is just the sadness that, you go to these amazing venues and watch this great sport and there's no one there to enjoy it. I went to the judo for 3 days and Japan won a total of 9 gold medals there in, a sport that they invented. It's just a shame there was no one there to see it.
I'm sure a lot of people were watching at home anyway. I know who will be watching the Games though, China. It's hosting the Winter Games next year. How do you think they're preparing given the uncertainty of being in this pandemic?
Well, the fact that Beijing is staging the Olympics in February of next year is quite an interesting scenario because I think if the Tokyo Games hadn't been postponed by a year, there would be much more focus on the fact that Beijing is hosting these Olympics again for the second time. Remember, they hosted the Summer Games in 2008, and their human rights record will increasingly come under scrutiny after this. In terms of how they're going to deal with hosting a Games during the pandemic, I know certainly the fear among my colleagues here in the main press centre is that whereas Japan has had these restrictions and regulations and has applied them relatively sympathetically and has been quite understanding about journalists trying to do their job, I think the fear is that China will use the regulations imposed because of COVID to really crack down on journalism. For example, when we arrived here, we had to do a 3-day quarantine, but we did that in the hotel. But I think in Beijing, for example, we could have to do, maybe even a week's quarantine and we'll have to stay in our rooms. And our movement will be even more restricted than it normally would be in China, which is a big fear for people here.
It remains to be seen. Duncan, there also remains controversy over the eligibility of Russian athletes to compete under the flag of the Russian Olympic Committee. Have those concerns been put to bed at these Games?
I think it's a mixed view about the fact that Russia are competing as the Russian Olympic Committee, or ROC, R-O-C, as they're being officially introduced. I think there's some anger among some competitors who feel that they got off lightly, but also there's a feeling among some people here that the athletes competing at these Games are being punished for the sins of, what happened a decade ago, because we're going back here to preparations for Sochi 2014. I think everybody knows that rock are Russia. The only real difference is that the national anthem isn't played when they win a gold medal. They play a piece of Tchaikovsky. They're easily identifiable as Russia. The Russian Olympic Committee includes the colours of the Russian flag. Their team kit has the Russian, national colours. So I don't think it's made a great deal of difference to Russia.
Just finally, Duncan, with just a couple of days left, what can we expect from the Games and also the closing ceremony?
Well, the closing ceremony is quite a closely guarded secret, as it always is at these affairs. We had a press conference this morning with officials from Paris 2024, because they, of course, have a handover ceremony in that game. And we will then look forward to the next Summer Olympics, which will only be in 3 years. In terms of sport, we've got a lot of gold medals coming up over the next few days. One of the interesting stories that has emerged in the last hour is that the women's marathon, which has been moved nearly 1,000 kilometres away to Sapporo, where it was supposed to be cooler than it is in Tokyo, has had to be brought forward an hour to 6 a.m. tomorrow, because Sapporo is actually going to be hotter than Tokyo. So that's quite an interesting thing that's happened.
Wow, we have been seeing the sweltering heat that some of the athletes have been performing in. Tell us about the new members elected for the Athletes Commission as well.
Well, there was the IOC Athletes Commission, which is you have to have competed in the last Olympics at least to be eligible for election. There were 4 places up for grabs. The big name that got on was the Spanish basketball player Pau Gasol, a 2-time NBA champion with the LA Lakers. He polled the most votes. He got nearly 2,000 votes. There was actually 30 candidates standing, including Australia's Kate Campbell, who didn't do that well. She finished 11th with 991 votes. But I'm sure she's happier with her 2 gold medals.
Indeed. Well, Duncan, we'll have to leave it there. Enjoy your last couple of days. I understand you have to leave Japan pretty much within 2 days. You can't even enjoy the country. The games are just very different, aren't they?
They are. I'm out of here on Tuesday, so yeah, I haven't really had a chance to see much apart from the main press centre, venues, the hotel and media buses.
Well, thanks for bringing us all the coverage of the Olympics. We've really enjoyed it from over here. Duncan McKay, thanks so much.
Thank you.